So good morning. Today we're going to continue working with Illustrator's drawing tools, and I'm going to be kind of going over the main tool, which will be the pencil tool. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to start by creating a new document that's 8.5 by 11, so you can kind of see 8.5 by 11. If it's not, go ahead and do that. CMYK is fine, and we're going to hit create, and that'll give us an 8.5 by 11 artboard. Now, by default, if you don't see, if for whatever reason your things are a little bit wonky and you don't have the same palette as me, go ahead and go to Windows, Workspace. Make sure Essentials Classic is selected, and if it is, go ahead and reset Essentials Classic, and you should have the same workspace that I have here. I'm going to hit the D for default button to give me my white fill and black stroke. And my white fill, I'm going to go ahead and make it transparent so we can see through it. And I'm going to make sure my stroke is set to 1 point if it's not already. So let's get started with the pencil tool. Now, if you hit the letter N as in Nancy, that'll jump you to the pencil tool, or you can kind of find it on the area here. It's under the shape builder tool. So if you have this shaper tool, you can see it here. And the nice thing about the pencil tool, let's go ahead and just show you what it does. It just draws a line. So you can kind of see another line, and notice how it smooths it out. So even if you're really, really kind of messed up, it's going to help to smooth things out. I'm going to undo that a couple times just so you can see. Now, if you double click any of these tools, but specifically the pencil tool, you're going to get some options here, and you can see that you can actually draw more accurate. So if I move this all the way up to accuracy, very accurate, and I hit OK, you can kind of see that it'll actually draw with lots and lots of vector points here. In other words, this shape is almost unusable if it's expected to be smooth. But if you double click it the other way as well, and then hit OK, and then I draw that same shape, you can kind of see it smooths it all out. You have much less vector points going on. So you can decide how you want to draw. By default, I put it up a little bit more smoothly. Then another thing that this does is it automatically closes paths when it gets to about 15 pixels of the end line. So for instance, if I did this and have it open like that, it'll keep this open. But if I have this and then I get very close to the end but not quite touch, notice how it makes a solid shape, which is something we're going to want to do too. You can always change this tolerance here from 15. You can make it a little bit higher so things work. Also, edit selected paths. This is a really nice feature. So for instance, say I feel like I've made a mistake on this path. I'm going to select this path, and I'm just going to hit the N tool to jump to the pencil tool. And you'll see that if I actually go back along that path, if I start within 6 pixels and end within 6 pixels, I can actually redraw something. So the drawing is, and you can see that you can also mess things up. But you have to start and end on the path in order to fix something. So if I messed up here, I could start here and then fix it by going here, and it'll redraw that path. So this is really nice. But in order for this to happen, notice how nothing happens here, even if I'm really close. That's because this path is not selected. So you have to select the path, and then go to the pencil tool, and then continue to draw as you wish. So you can take a break, come back, and then you can continue drawing, which is what we're going to be doing today. And remember, when these elements are closed, they will fill. So let's go ahead and give a fill here, and you can see that that element will fill. Now, if I wanted to fill this one, and you can kind of see what will happen if I actually fill this with a color, you'll see that it's not a closed shape, so but it still fills in most of the path. So something to be aware of when you don't have something that's closed, it can still fill, but you just will have this element where there's no stroke. So that's just something to be aware of. Anyway, this is how the pencil tool works. Now, with the pencil tool, like say you draw some lines and you want to smooth. Let's say, for instance, you go to more accurate. Let's make this a little more accurate so it's not so smooth. And you're kind of drawing, and you want to smooth this out. There is a tool that you can use called the Smooth tool. And what that does, as you can kind of see here, it actually will remove some of the points just by drawing over the top of it. You can kind of see it smooths things out. So it's already pretty smooth here, but if you find that you're making a lot of unsmooth paths or whatever, and you want to make it look a little smoother, you can do that as well. So you notice how it smoothed this out, and you can go over it and over it until you get the smoothness you want. Now the way to get to this normally when you're in the pencil tool, because you're drawing and you want to smooth this out, is you hold the Option key down. So let's see. Usually it's the Option key. Nope. Well, the smooth tool normally was the Option key, but you can go back to the smooth tool by manually and then go ahead and smooth everything out so that it's a nice, clean, super soft path. And the reason we're going over this today is because we're going to be illustrating something based off of an object or a photograph that we download from the internet. So let's go ahead and select everything here if you've been following along. Let's just delete it. And what I'm going to do is going to go to File, Place, and we're going to place this dolphin image that I've given you. And we're just going to put it in. Obviously, it's very small, so we're going to make it much bigger. I'm holding the Shift key so it scales proportionally. And I'm going to make it about a little bit bigger than the artboard, so you can kind of see that here. I'm going to open up my layers palette here, and you can see it's right here that this dolphin element is in this layer. And we're going to do what we normally do. We're going to go to our opacity in our properties panel, turn it down to about 50% so we can see what we're doing. We're going to lock this layer now. We're going to create a new layer. We're going to call it Drawing. And we're going to select it so that we're drawing on this layer. This way we can't move anything here, and we pretty much can get started drawing. So the idea here is we're going to be using the pencil tool to trace these elements here. And again, I'm using a trackpad. If you've got a Wacom tablet or if you've got a mouse, which is really great, you're going to have a lot easier time. Now, the way I want you to draw this is I want you to have some foreground elements and background elements as well. So in other words, what I see is one outline shape here, and then I see another outline shape here as a separate shape that's going to go behind the dolphin, and then a third object here that's going to be in front of the dolphin, and then some elements like eyes and such. So let's go ahead and show you how I would go about doing that. So I'm going to go to the pencil tool. I'm going to make sure my stroke is set to black. Hit D for default, as we normally do. And I'm going to make sure that the fill is transparent so that we can still see the dolphin. Otherwise, we're going to be drawing some stuff that we can't see. So let's get started. Let's start with the back fin. So for instance, if I were to take this pencil tool and just draw like this, and then I'm just making a finished element. You can see it's pretty good, but I can redraw this because I want to get it as accurate as possible. Maybe this is not as perfect. And then maybe I want to smooth it a little bit to make it look a little bit better. So I'll use a smooth tool and just kind of go over it, smooth some of these elements out so they don't feel so rough. Just kind of just smooth, smooth, smooth. And that becomes one of my elements. And you can see now if I take the foreground or the fill color and make it white, it actually is a white element. So you can kind of see that that can fill in very nicely. Okay, so we're going to go, I'm going to deselect with the move tool or with the selection tool, and then I'm going to go back N as in Nancy to the pencil tool, right? And then I'm going to start, but remember, I'm not going to start here. I'm going to kind of start somewhere else, and I'm going to outline this entire dolphin. So I'm just kind of going to go here, being somewhat careful to be on the outline. And then I'm going to ignore that part, and I'm going to have to stop because I need to use my trackpad to move. But you can see as long as I start at the very close to that previous line, don't like what I've done there. I'm going to change my tool to a little bit smoother. That's probably why it's being so unsmooth. And now I'll just redraw that, and you'll see this will be a much smoother thing, as you can kind of see. And then boop. There, that's nice. Go boop. That looks okay, and then I'm going to continue drawing from this point. Kind of made a mistake there, so let's continue up here. Again, if you make a mistake, you can always fix it, right? Even on a trackpad, you can illustrate. And then we're going to finish it off going through that fin because we don't have to worry about it so much. Boop. And there There we go. And it should have, I must have made a path mistake here. I'm going to undo because it did, I was more than 6 pixels away from this path, so it didn't make a closed path. So when we go back, it's good to see the mistakes as well. You can kind of see how that worked. Okay, let's see. And now you can see the path is still selected. And so when I get really close, you'll see the icon change to a circle, and that closes the path. Now this is a closed path. I can show you that by closing the path like that. You can kind of see how that works as well. Okay, we'll leave that transparent. And then finally, we're going to deselect that path just by clicking away and then selecting the pencil tool. And now we're going to just trace this fin. And I'm going to make it a solid piece as well. And I'm going to make the eyeball a solid. That's a solid. And now I'm going to go ahead and just make some marks. Like I'm going to put the mouth in. I'm going to put some like marks here. Put some some shading marks so that you can kind of see how that works. Now, if you don't like what you've done on one of the paths, go ahead and select that path just like that. Go to the pencil tool, and that allows you to, again, to like redraw that so that it's more accurate. Or it should at least allow you to do that. There you go. And remember, you have to have that tolerance be very close to the path itself. Otherwise, it won't redraw. And if you need to smooth anything, you select the path as well, and then go to the smooth tool, and you can smooth just by drawing over that path with the smooth tool. So it makes it a little bit smoother. You can kind of see that really smoothed up this area. This is really nice and smooth. You can kind of see. So you can go back and create something that looks really good, even with a trackpad if you don't have a Wacom tablet. Okay, I want to get this little element here, so I'm going to go to the pencil tool, N as in Nancy, and I'm just going to add this element in here. I'm going to undo that, and I'm going to make sure that this path is not selected, so just select away from it before I use the pencil tool so that I don't create a point here, because I want this fin to be behind the top of the head. I want the head to be nice and clean. Let's go ahead and do that. And now this is a filled in element. Okay, so at this point, what we're going to do is we're going to arrange different things back and forth and then use the fill to kind of see what everything's like. So what I'm going to do is just select everything here. And then I'm going to fill all of this with white. And you can kind of see this already happens to be in the right location, right? It's already in the back. But this right here looks like a horn. So what we're going to do is right click on it. And you can see arrange, and then I'm going to select arrange. Oh, sorry. Arrange down here, and I'm going to send it to the back. Shift Command bracket key. And what that does is it puts this behind this guy, which is what we want, right? Now this happens to be in the right location. You can kind of see it's overlapping, and this is why we have different elements at different places and those kinds of things. Now you can fill in more detail if you want, but again, we're mainly working on illustration at this point. So the next thing I want to go over, now that we have the pencil tool, is how to make this a little more interesting, right? It's a pretty good illustration at this point. Obviously, we can smooth some of this stuff out if we wanted to. You know, I feel like I'm always trying to get stuff to be perfect using the smooth tool. But there's other things that we can do to this illustration to make it a little more dynamic, a little more interesting. And one of the things that we're going to do here is we're going to change the width of the stroke. We're going to make the stroke a little more interesting. Now, if you select a stroke, so here's an object with a fill of white and an outline that's pretty much you know, a solid, uniform, one-point stroke. You can obviously make it thicker, which is something you always kind of want to do, is have different thicknesses in lines. So say, for instance, the outline, you might want to make it a little bit thicker, and all of a sudden it looks just a little more interesting. The same with the eye. Maybe you want to make that a little bit thicker. Maybe the mouth as well, so this becomes a stroke here. You can kind of see you can move these strokes, which is nice, and make that a little bit thicker, and then just kind of move it with the arrow key or however you want to do it. But another thing you can do is actually make this stroke have a different like sensibility. Like for instance, here's a stroke, right? And what I'm going to do is go from uniform, and I'm going to select this shape. And notice what it did. It created this kind of like tapered element where it starts thin, goes thick, and then thin again. And if you increase the stroke size, you'll really increase that look, right? So for instance, this makes it look more like somebody who was using a calligraphy pen or something like that, or an art pen of some type. Now there are different different strokes that you can use, so that you can see this is kind of a double tapered thing, and increasing the stroke width. Notice how it always comes to a point, no matter how thick you go. So you can see you can get some really interesting effects. Now remember, this is still a stroke. This is not an actual element, but you can always go back. So say for instance, I want to give this a little bit more interest, and I try something and I'm like, yeah, that looks pretty good, but I'll increase the stroke size. And I'm like, okay, that looks good. And I'll try the same for this. I'll use the same element and increase the size. And you can kind of see that kind of works. And all of a sudden you have something that looks a little bit pretty interesting. Now, you probably don't want to do that with the main outline, because you want that to be somewhat consistent. Let's see what happens if we were to do something like that, and you'll see what happens right away is that you get this tapered element, and then it gets thicker again. And if I increase the stroke size so you can see that, it's just not that, you see, it's just not working as well. So let's undo that and go back to a uniform. So uniform is sometimes useful, especially if you're drawing things like illustrations. So we're here for this element, right? Maybe we can give this a little bit more of a dynamic stroke. That looks pretty good. Now we could do something even more interesting. So for instance, say I wanted to, I'm going to just create a line for you so you can kind of see, and hold down the shift and then hit escape. And boom. Okay, so now I have this line. I'm going to go back to the uniform stroke here, just so you can see what I'm going to be doing. Okay, so we've got this line. I'm going to make it a little thicker so you can see it. Now here's the cool part. You could take something like the width tool. Remember, we've used this before, Shift W, and actually create like your own custom stroke. So for instance, I'm going to do this here. I'm creating this this interesting pen, in essence. This is really nice. If you're an artist, you'll be like, oh my god, this is so cool. And what I've done is created this kind of like wobbly stroke, right? Now if I want to save this as a stroke so that I can use it, you can kind of see it right there. All you have to do is jump down here and actually save it, add it to your profiles for this drawing, and I'll just call it wobbly. And now it is available. So watch what happens if I take wobbly. I don't need this line anymore, and I apply it to this outside stroke. Just go down to uniform, and you'll notice wobbly's here. And then if you increase the stroke, you kind of see that that gives you this kind of hand-drawn wobbly look that is not quite, not quite a uniform stroke, but it gives you some dynamic look. So using the width tool to create a stroke allows you then to actually create an entire set of strokes that you can apply to your illustration. So I hope this is kind of a little bit of fun. You can add, now at this point you can go in and add your own. Now you can see if I use the wobbly stroke for a circle, it's going to give you this shape. So I'm going to go back to uniform. Be careful that you don't have these things not selected correctly. Bring my stroke down to like 2. There we go. And maybe I want to give the dolphin a little eyeball. And remember, you can always, let's see, there we go. And that's what we've got so far. So what I'd like you to do is take some time and use the pencil tool to go ahead and draw over these other dolphins as well. So I'm going to actually just take this entire dolphin. I feel it's pretty done. Maybe I'll just add a couple of like strokes here. And then change them to, and notice how, because I'm not touching the lines, they're not connecting, which is really nice. And then maybe I'll take these strokes, this one, I'm holding the shift key to shift select, and then I'll pick something that looks, oh, one thing, notice that if you want these to flip the other way, like I want the thick part to be at the bottom, and not the top. I'm just going to increase the stroke. So say you wanted to flip these around. You can do that in the properties panel here by just hitting this flip button, and that'll change the location of that stroke. So instead of starting with it thick and going thin, if it has an orientation, you can flip that as well here. So I'm pretty happy with that, liking it. I guess maybe I don't like it that much, but whatever. You can kind of play with this to your heart's content and do whatever you like. But once you've got one of the dolphins done, what I'd like you to do is select all of it using the selector here, and go ahead and go to Object Group, right? You want to group this so this way now that if you move it, you can kind of see, you can create duplicates, but you've got, in essence, your first dolphin illustration. Think about how you're going to go about doing this dolphin as well as this dolphin. You can move this out of the way if you don't want to hit it every once in a while. I don't need this stroke anymore because I've already created that stroke here, but you can create other ones. And so start with a uniform line, right? Maybe one stroke of like 1 point, right? Just hitting the 1 here on the stroke palette here. And then go ahead and like outline the shapes, the foreground shapes, the background shapes. Remember to like think about like what's going to be in front. Remember to make sure that this is on transparent while you're drawing so that you can actually see what you're doing. Once you've got the main outline and then a couple of the background elements, you can then add in all the little details if you want. And in the future, we're going to be showing you how to create lots of interesting patterns. But this is a good place to start, and I hope you have a lot of fun with this this assignment. Again, so, and then you're like, well, what am I supposed to turn in? What I'd like you to turn in is this artboard with 3 dolphins, 1, 2, 3. You can turn off the, you can hide the background if you want. Or you can leave it on, but go ahead and turn this in as an Illustrator file to this assignment, and that's all you need to do for the classwork. And next week we're going to continue working with Illustrator to create interesting patterns, illustrations, more interesting illustrations that will eventually become a class coloring book. Okay, thanks.